In 2017, a man named Haley Adams sat down at his kitchen table, opened his laptop, and watched 4 hours of news. He watched a segment about crime rates in his city. He watched a panel of experts arguing about immigration. He watched 3 separate breaking news alerts, each one more urgent than the last. And by the time he closed the laptop, Haley felt something that had become completely normal to him. He felt furious. He felt unsafe. He felt like the world was collapsing. What Haley did not know, what nobody told him, was that every single emotion he felt that evening had been deliberately manufactured by a system that made $37 every time his heart rate spiked. And that system did not care about Haley Adams. It never did. It only cared about one thing: that he came back tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after that. Now, before we talk about the modern machine, I need to take you back to 1897, because what is happening to you right now has a history, and that history begins with 2 of the most powerful men in American media. Their names were William Randolph Hearst and Joseph Pulitzer, and between them, they owned the 2 most widely read newspapers in New York City. Now, here is what you need to understand about Hearst and Pulitzer. They were not journalists. They were not truth seekers. They were not public servants. They were businessmen. And they had discovered something that would permanently rewire the relationship between media and the human mind. They discovered that calm, accurate, measured reporting did not sell newspapers, but fear, outrage, and vivid descriptions of suffering, real or slightly exaggerated, sold newspapers by the millions. So, when Cuba began its revolution against Spain in 1895, Hearst did not send a journalist to Havana. He sent an illustrator, a man named Frederick Remington. And Remington, after arriving in Cuba and finding relative quiet, cabled Hearst back with this message: "Everything is quiet here. There is no trouble. There will be no war." Hearst's response, according to legend, was 4 words: "You furnish the pictures, I'll furnish the war." Now, historians debate whether that exchange actually happened word for word, but what is not debated is what happened next. American newspapers ran story after story, each more outraged than the last, each one more insistent that American honor was at stake, each one carefully calibrated to make readers feel that inaction was cowardice. And in 1898, America went to war with Spain. One man with one newspaper manufactured enough collective anger to start an actual war. Now ask yourself, what could 1,000 of them do with the internet and your phone number? And then there's you. I want you to think about the last time you felt genuinely angry at something you read online. Not mildly irritated, genuinely, physically angry. Your jaw tightened, your breathing changed. You wanted to share it immediately. You wanted other people to feel what you were feeling. Got it? Good. Now I want you to hold that memory, because in approximately 90 seconds, you are going to understand exactly why that happened and who profited from it. And it is going to make you angrier than the original story ever did. In 1973, a professor at the University of Pennsylvania named George Gerbner began what would become one of the most important and most deliberately ignored studies in the history of communication science. He called it cultivation theory. The premise was devastatingly simple. Gerbner wanted to know what happened to the human brain, not from watching one scary news story, but from watching thousands of them, over years, over decades. What he found should have changed everything. People who watched more than 4 hours of television news per day began to believe the world was statistically far more dangerous than it actually was. They overestimated their likelihood of being a victim of violent crime by a factor of 10. They believed their neighborhood was less safe, even when crime rates were actively falling. They reported higher generalized anxiety, higher distrust of strangers, and, most importantly for our story, significantly higher levels of outrage at groups they had been repeatedly shown as threats. Gerbner called this mean world syndrome. The world is not actually meaner, the coverage is, and your brain, after years of this, cannot tell the difference. But here is what Gerbner's research did not fully anticipate, because it could not have. He was studying television in 1973. He was not studying an algorithm that could learn in real time exactly which story made your specific brain most afraid and serve you 17 more of them before you put your phone down. Let me show you the exact architecture, because this is where the story stops being history and starts being about your life specifically. In 2014, researchers at Columbia University analyzed over 100,000 news articles and measured their social media engagement against their emotional content. The findings were not subtle. Articles triggering high arousal negative emotions, specifically fear, outrage, and disgust, were shared at a rate 4 times higher than articles triggering low arousal emotions like sadness or calm interest. 4 times. Now, every major newsroom in America by 2016 had access to real-time engagement dashboards that told them within minutes of publication exactly how much outrage a given headline was generating. This is documented. The Atlantic, the New York Times, virtually every major digital outlet employs teams of analysts whose function is to monitor emotional response and produce more of whatever is producing the most of it. Inside newsrooms, they call this optimization. It is a clean word for a filthy process. But the part that should make your stomach physically turn is this. By 2018, several major advertising platforms had developed what they internally called sentiment targeting, the ability to serve advertisements specifically to users in states of high emotional arousal, meaning the angrier you are, the more valuable you are to an advertiser. Your outrage is a product. It has a price. It is bought and sold while you're feeling it, and you were never once asked for your consent. And then there's you, again. Think about your phone right now. Think about how many times you have opened a news app, not because you had a specific question, but because of a feeling, a pull, an almost physical need to check what is happening, what you might be missing, what threat might have emerged in the last 40 minutes since you last checked. That feeling has a name in behavioral psychology. It is called variable reward conditioning, and it is the exact same neurological mechanism that makes slot machines the most profitable machines ever built by human beings. The news feed is a slot machine. Every refresh is a pull of the lever. Sometimes you get nothing important. Sometimes you get mildly interesting. And occasionally, you get something that makes your blood pressure spike and your hands start typing before your brain has had time to ask a single question. That spike is the jackpot, and the machine was built specifically to keep you pulling until you hit it. Now, I want to be careful here, because this is the part of the story where it becomes very easy to slide into helplessness, to conclude that the machine is too large, too sophisticated, too financially entrenched to ever be resisted by a single person sitting in a single room with a phone. But the research does not support that conclusion, and I refuse to leave you there. Because here is what the science actually shows. A 2019 study published in Health Communication found that participants who reduced daily news consumption from 4 hours to 30 minutes reported measurable reductions in anxiety in 2 weeks, not months, 2 weeks. The brain that was trained to be outraged can be retrained, not quickly, not without effort, but systematically. Researchers at the University of Texas documented what they call news literacy inoculation, the simple act of understanding mechanically how outrage is manufactured reduces its effectiveness on the person who understands it. Not to zero, the emotional response is still there, but the behavior that follows, the share, the click, the 3-hour doom scroll, happens significantly less because the machine runs on unconscious engagement, and consciousness is the one input the machine was never designed to handle. There is one question that costs 2 seconds and is the most expensive question the outrage machine has ever faced. Before you share anything that made your blood pressure rise, ask this: who profits if I am angry right now? 2 seconds every time. That question is the off switch that the machine spent 30 years hoping you would never find. Haley Adams, the man we started with, is not a real person. I made him up. But the 4 hours of news he watched that evening, the manufactured fear, the spike in heart rate, the feeling of the world collapsing, that is completely real. That is Tuesday for millions of Americans. The outrage machine is not a conspiracy theory. It is not a shadowy cabal of villains deciding to make America afraid. It is something far more mundane and far more frightening. It is a rational financial response to the discovery that anger is the most monetizable human emotion ever identified. Yellow journalism did not die in 1898. It got a broadband connection, a targeting algorithm, a real-time engagement dashboard, and a $21 billion annual budget. And it will keep running for exactly as long as we keep feeding it. That is not a conspiracy theory. That is a quarterly earnings report. And the most radical thing you can do in a system designed to profit from your rage is to simply refuse to be enraged on schedule. If something shifted in the way you understand your own anger after watching this, share it with one person who you have watched get angrier every single year. Because the most powerful thing a democracy can do is understand the machine that is trying to run it.